You know that specific moment of absolute dread when you walk up to your car after it has been parked under a pine tree for even just a few hours, and you see those little amber yellow blobs sitting on your hood like they were welded there by a tiny blowtorch overnight, and your stomach just drops because you already know what comes next. And that knowledge alone is enough to ruin the rest of your entire day, because every single person who has ever owned a car has made the catastrophic mistake of reaching out with their fingernail and just trying to flick one of those little drops off because it looks so small and so insignificant sitting there on the paint. And you think it will just pop right off clean, like a piece of dried glue on a plastic surface. But instead, what happens is your nail slides up under the edge of it and you feel the resistance immediately. And something in your brain tells you to stop, but you do not stop, and you push a little harder, and then one of two things happens. Either the sap stretches like taffy and snaps back down against the paint, leaving a greasy smear across your clear coat, or worse, the whole drop pops off, taking a tiny flake of your clear coat with it right down to the color layer. And now you are standing in a parking lot staring at a dull, white, chalky spot on your hood that was not there 20 minutes ago. And no amount of wax or polish is going to fix that without a machine and a compound and a whole weekend you did not plan to sacrifice. And the worst part is that you did exactly what every single person does, because nobody ever warned you that hardened pine resin is not just sticky, it is chemically bonded to your paint at a molecular level after it cures, and trying to mechanically remove it with your finger or a plastic scraper or, God forbid, a paper towel is functionally the same as dragging sandpaper across your clear coat. And the detailing industry has known this for decades. And rather than educating you, they decided to sell you a $20 bottle of watery liquid solvent in an orange spray bottle with a picture of a pine tree on the label and a bold font, promising instant removal. And you bought it because what choice did you have? And then you sprayed it on the sap and watched it immediately run down the side of your door panel onto your rubber window seal and drip off the lower body panel onto the ground, and you had to spray it again and again using half the bottle, chasing a single quarter-size spot, while the solvent pooled in the gap between your door and your trim and chemically ate into your factory rubber seal, leaving a white powdery residue that is still there right now if you go look, because that product was never engineered to actually solve your problem. It was engineered to make you feel like it might solve your problem while being watery enough that you have to use a lot of it every single time. And now I am going to tell you something that the entire detailing industry does not want you to hear, because it is sitting in your bathroom right now in a little plastic bottle that you bought at the dollar store for $2. And it is called hand sanitizer. And it will melt rock hard pine resin off your paint in 30 seconds flat without scratching your clear coat, without dripping onto your window seals, and without costing you a single dollar more than you have already spent. And the reason it works is not some marketing gimmick, it is pure chemistry. And once you understand the chemistry, you will never spend another dollar on a specialty sap remover again for the rest of your life, because you will know the dirty little secret that makes those $20 products completely and totally obsolete. And that secret is this: the alcohol content in hand sanitizer is typically between 60 and 70% ethyl alcohol, which is the exact same chemical mechanism that expensive automotive solvent products use to dissolve organic resin. But here is the critical difference that nobody is talking about. Hand sanitizer is formulated as a thick gel because it is designed to sit on your hands and sanitize them without immediately dripping off. And that gel consistency is the single most important property for dissolving tree sap, because it keeps the alcohol in direct, sustained contact with the sap instead of running away from it instantly. And before I go any further, I need you to do something right now, because the people who make these watered down solvent sprays genuinely count on you. Not knowing this information, they count on you feeling helpless and reaching for their product every spring and summer when the pines start dropping resin all over every car in the neighborhood. And the only thing that disrupts that cycle is You hitting that subscribe button right now and joining the community of people who have decided they are done funding products that were deliberately engineered to be just barely effective enough that you keep buying them over and over again and never quite solve the underlying problem. So hit subscribe and let me finish showing you exactly why this $2 bathroom gel is the most powerful sap removal tool that you can own. And I want you to understand the actual chemistry here, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it, and it completely changes how you look at every specialty. Detailing product on the shelf tree sap is a biological polymer resin, which means it is a chain of organic molecules linked together, and when that resin first drips from a pine tree, it is soft and sticky because it still contains its natural oils, and those oils are what keep the polymer chains loose and mobile. But as the sap sits on your hot paint panel in the sun, those oils evaporate, and as they evaporate, the polymer chains begin to cross-link with each other, which is a chemical process where individual molecular chains grab onto one another and form a rigid interlocking matrix, and this is why a fresh sap drop feels sticky and pliable. But a sap drop that has been sitting on your hood for 3 days feels like a tiny piece of amber because it has essentially undergone the early stages of fossilization. And the reason: alcohol dissolves. It is that ethyl alcohol is what chemists call a polar protic solvent, which means it has a specific molecular geometry that can penetrate between those cross-linked polymer chains and break the intermolecular bonds, holding them together by essentially surrounding each polymer segment with alcohol molecules that are more attracted to the resin than the resin is to itself. And the entire process of breaking down a fully cured resin drop requires sustained contact time, because the alcohol has to progressively work its way through multiple layers of cross-linked polymer from the outside of the drop inward. And this is precisely why a thin, watery solvent fails completely on hardened sap, because the moment you spray it on the paint, it begins to run, and by the time it has traveled 6 inches down your door panel, it has already left the sap, and it is now sitting on your rubber window seal, doing absolutely nothing to the resin, but doing quite a lot of damage to the factory rubber compound in your weather strip, which is a petroleum-derived material that reacts very poorly to sustained solvent exposure. And if you want to see evidence of this, just look at the window seals on any car that has been regularly treated with spray solvent removers, and you will see white, chalky, oxidized rubber that is brittle and cracked because the solvent stripped the plasticizers out of the rubber compound every single time it ran down the glass and pooled in that gap between the glass and the door, and the gel formula of hand sanitizer eliminates this failure mode entirely because it does not run. It sits precisely where you place it and holds the alcohol in sustained contact with the sap long enough for the chemistry to actually complete. And now, let me give you the exact protocol, because the application method is just as important as the product itself, and doing this wrong can still damage your paint, even with the correct chemical. And I am not exaggerating when I say this can cause serious permanent damage if you skip the warning I am about to give you. So the first step is to place a generous drop of standard alcohol-based hand sanitizer directly on top of the sap deposit. And I mean directly on it, not around it, not near it, directly on top of it. And the drop should be thick enough to completely cover the sap and sit above it slightly like a small dome of gel resting on the paint surface, and then you do absolutely nothing for 60 seconds. And I mean exactly 60 seconds, not 30, not 45, 60, because the first 30 seconds is the alcohol working through the outer oxidized layer of the resin. And the second 30 seconds is the alcohol penetrating into the core of the deposit. And if you try to wipe at the 30-second mark, you will often find the outside of the drop has turned liquid, but the center is still bonded hard to the paint, and you will be tempted to press harder to remove that stubborn center, and that is exactly where the damage happens. So wait the full 60 seconds, and at the 60-second mark, take a clean folded microfiber towel and place it gently over the softened sap, and use the lightest possible contact wiping pressure to move the dissolved resin off the paint. And the reason this is so critical, and the reason I am going to say this as clearly as I possibly can, is that old hardened sap drops, especially drops that have been on the paint for more than a few days, often trap microscopic particles of silica from tree bark and atmospheric dirt inside the crystalline resin matrix. Those particles are essentially tiny pieces of rock suspended inside the sap deposit, and when the alcohol dissolves the resin matrix, those particles do not dissolve with it. They are released into the liquefied gel sitting on your paint, and if you apply downward pressure with your microfiber, at that moment, those liberated silica crystals will be dragged across the soft clear coat under the mechanical force of your hand, and they will scratch it, and not light surface scratches that you can polish out with a light abrasive but deep mechanical gouges that go straight through the clear coat layer, down to the color layer, or in severe cases, all the way to the primer. And that is damage that requires wet sanding, respray to fix, which means this specific mistake can turn a $2 fix into a $1,500 body shop bill. So the wiping motion must be a feather light drag with zero downward pressure, using just the weight of the microfiber itself against the paint. And if there is any resistance at all, stop immediately, apply another drop of hand sanitizer, let it sit for another 60 seconds, and try again, because the chemistry is still working, and forcing it mechanically will always cause more damage than patience will. And once the sap is removed, give that area a quick wipe with a clean, dry section of microfiber and apply a small amount of spray wax or paint sealant to reseal the area, because the alcohol will have temporarily stripped any wax or coating you had on that specific spot, and leaving it bare is just inviting oxidation to start. And now I want you to think about what you actually get for $20 when you buy a commercial automotive sap and tar remover, because I want you to be genuinely angry about it, because the anger is justified. You are getting a diluted petroleum distillate, or in some cases an alcohol solution that has been deliberately formulated in thin viscosity, so it sprays easily from a bottle, and the manufacturers know. It runs immediately. They know it cannot maintain contact with the sap long enough to fully dissolve it on first application. They know it gets into your rubber seals, and they know you will use significantly more product per application than you need to, because it keeps running off the panel. But thin liquids are cheaper to produce, they ship better, they feel more impressive when you spray them, and they maintain plausible deniability, because technically the chemistry can work if you apply enough of it and keep it wet long enough, which you cannot do because it keeps dripping onto the ground, and the contrast against the hand sanitizer is not even close, because the gel stays exactly where you put it. The alcohol concentration is more than sufficient to break the polymer chains. The sustained contact time is guaranteed by the gel formula. It costs $2 for a bottle that will handle dozens of sap incidents. It does not drip onto your weather strip, and it does not leave white stains on your rubber trim. And the only thing it cannot do is look impressive on a store shelf with a picture of a pine cone on. The label, which is the single most important feature of the $20 version as far as its manufacturer is concerned. And I want you to do something specific right now. Before this video ends, I want you to think of one person you know who parks their car outside under trees every single day, whether it is a neighbor, a coworker, a family member, someone who complains about their car looking terrible, or who you have seen trying to scrape sap off their hood with a credit card, or a key, or something even more destructive. And I want you to share this video with them immediately right now before you do anything else. Because the information in this video is the difference between a car that holds its paint value for 10 years and a car whose clear coat is permanently ruined by a combination of aggressive mechanical removal attempts and corrosive solvent products, dripping into every rubber seal on the body, and that damage is irreversible once it happens. There is no gel, no chemical, no detailing product on the planet that restores chemically burned weather strip or fills the gouges left by silica crystals dragged under pressure across clear coat by someone who was just trying to clean their car and did not know any better. And the only reason they did not know any better is that the industry selling them the wrong product had absolutely no incentive to ever tell them the right answer. So share this video, do it right. Now, tag them in the comments, send it in a message, save their paint from a mistake that costs nothing to avoid and everything to fix if you wait